Have you ever felt confident everywhere in your life, but completely different inside a relationship? You're great at work, you make decisions, people respect your opinion, you know your value. But then someone becomes emotionally important to you, and suddenly you're overthinking your texts, waiting for reassurance, second-guessing yourself. And afterward you wonder, why did I act like that? That's not even who I am. If that sounds familiar, stay with me because today we're talking about why strong women sometimes feel small in love. And the answer might surprise you. Hi, I'm Eve Kyle, relationship recovery coach, and this is Love Forward with Eve, a space where we heal the past, empower the present, and love forward into healthy relationships. Today we're talking about something many high-achieving women might struggle behind the scene. Because when relationships don't work, most women assume something must be wrong with them. Like, I must communicate better. I should be more patient. I should try harder. But what if the issue isn't your strength? What if it's a pattern you learned long before the relationship ever began? And that is what we're unpacking today. Let's get into it. I understand this deeply because I lived it. There was a time when I looked confident on the outside. I was capable, independent, responsible, the kind of person who figured things out and didn't ask for much. I had built a life I was proud of. But inside certain relationships, I became someone else. I walked on eggshells. I over-explained myself. I worked harder to keep peace. And I would find myself monitoring someone else's emotional state before I had even checked in with my own. Adjusting, shrinking, performing a version of myself I barely recognized. And I remember thinking, how can I be so strong everywhere else but feel so unsure here? That question reframed everything. The answer wasn't strength or intelligence, it was familiarity. And once I recognized that, the pattern finally made sense. So let's talk about what is actually happening. Most strong women don't enter relationships insecure. They become insecure inside certain relationships. And here's why. Your strength, your competence, your ability to lead, to deliver, to show up, that was built consciously. It developed through experience and effort and time. You can see it. You build it on purpose. Your emotional patterns in relationships were built differently. They were built early, before you had language for them, before you had any capacity to question what you were absorbing. You were simply a child in the environment, learning what love looked and felt like. And your nervous system was taking notes, not in words, not in memories you can easily access, but in felt experience, in automatic responses that get triggered the moment intimacy gets close enough to matter. Attachment research is clear on this. Our earliest emotional environment shape what safety feels like to us. If love once meant working hard for approval, anticipating someone else's needs, or keeping the peace to avoid conflict, your brain learned something very powerful, which is effort equals connection. So later in life, intensity can feel like chemistry. Uncertainty can feel like exciting. And calm, consistent love sometimes feels unfamiliar, boring even. Not because you want chaos, but because your nervous system recognizes effort as love. And this is why you can be extraordinarily strong on the surface, but still feel completely disoriented in relationship. You are not the problem. You are operating on patterns that once protected you, in a situation that now requires new choices. And you can't think your way out of something that was never built through thinking. So, how do you know this is actually happening to you? Here are some signs. You start overthinking our conversations. You rehearse what you're going to say. You avoid bringing up needs because you don't want conflict. You feel responsible for someone else's emotions. You explain away behaviors that hurts you. You become more patient with others than you're protective with yourself. And slowly, without realizing it, you become smaller. Not because you lack confidence, but because you're adapting to survive connection. Feeling small in love doesn't always look the way people imagine. It doesn't always look like someone visibly falling apart or obviously mistreated. Sometimes it looks like the most capable woman in the room disappearing inside a relationship while appearing completely fine from the outside. Sometimes it looks like overfunctioning, doing more, giving more, managing more, because somewhere underneath there is belief that your value in a relationship is tied to your usefulness. That if you stop being available and helpful, something will be lost. Sometimes it looks like emotional self-sufficiency taken too far, handling everything alone not because you prefer it, but because asking for support has come to feel unsafe, like too much, like evidence of weakness. And sometimes it looks like accepting emotional unavailability from a romantic partner that you would never in a million years accept from a friend, and not fully understanding why your standard for love is so much lower than your standard for everything else. Does any of these sound familiar? Tell me in the comments which one you recognize in yourself. Now let's talk about the space of patterns, because I see this over and over again. And naming them is where awareness starts to have real traction. There's caretaking. You become responsible for emotional stability in your relationship. You manage the mood, smooth the tension, hold the whole thing together. There's people-pleasing. You avoid disagreement because connection feels fragile. You rather shrink than risk disruption. There's over-understanding. You empathize so deeply that you end up excusing behavior that genuinely cross your limits. You understand why they did it, so you absorb the cost of it. And there's proving. You believe that if you just love better, communicate better, give more, then things will finally feel secure. So you keep trying harder inside a dynamic that keeps requiring more. These patterns don't come from weakness. They come from strength, used in the wrong environment. Now here's something important. This usually didn't start with your partner. It started much earlier. Maybe emotional neglect taught you that your needs weren't important. So you learn to prioritize everyone else's needs and carry that into every relationship since. Maybe love felt conditional growing up, so you learned that your worth had to be earned, and you became exceptional at earning it. And maybe unpredictability was the norm, so you learned to monitor moods, read rooms, and adjust yourself before anyone even asks you to. Or maybe being useful. You feel lovable, so you became endless capable, endless available, endless giving, and call it love. That skill helped you survive. It made sense in the environment where it was developed. But now, it might be costing you yourself. And here's what I want you to hear. The pattern is not personal. It is not the verdict on your worth. It is a learned response. And the learned response can be unlearned. So I want to offer you something that I think is the most clarifying piece of this entire conversation. Familiarity and comfort are not the same thing. We tend to assume we are drawn to what feels good. But the nervous system is not drawn to what feels good. It is drawn to what feels known. That is why a woman who grew up with love that was inconsistent will find herself put toward partners who run hot and cold. Not because they want the pain, but the uncertainty feels like what love is supposed to feel like. And this is why a woman who learned that her needs were too much will keep under-asking your relationships. Will keep giving more than she receives. Will keep ending up feeling invisible and not quite understand how she got there again. The pattern keeps repeating not because something is fundamentally wrong with you, but because you have been following a map that was drawn a very long time ago, in a very different territory than the one you're actually trying to navigate now. So how do you actually shift this? The first step is awareness. Name what is happening, not with blame, but with honesty. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not unlovable. You are a strong woman running an old pattern. Name it as exactly that and nothing more. The second step is to reconnect with yourself. Ask, what do I actually need? What feels true for me? What am I avoiding saying? Because most women in this pattern spend so much energy tracking someone else that they have genuinely lost touch with their internal signal. The third step is to notice who you become around someone. Do you feel open or tense? Expansive or careful? More yourself or less? Because attraction tells you who you want, but emotional safety tells you who you can actually be yourself with. And those are not always the same person. And the last step, the one that changes everything, is learning to bring your real self into a relationship. Not the agreeable version, not the version that edits her needs so she won't be too much, or studies the room before she speaks. The real you, with your real preferences, your real boundaries, and your real voice. Because the love you're actually looking for, the steady, grounded kind, can't connect with a version of you that's performing. It can only connect with who you truly are. The biggest shift happened when you stop asking, what is wrong with me? And start asking, what environment actually allows me to be myself? Strong women don't need to become stronger. They don't need to become more guarded or more closed or more careful. They need relationships where strength isn't punished, where softness isn't taken advantage of, where they don't have to shrink to belong. And when you understand the pattern clearly enough, when you can see it for what it is rather than what it says about you, you stop following it unconsciously. You stop walking into the familiar and calling it chemistry. You stop working harder inside the dynamics that keep asking for more. You start choosing environments where you can be fully present, where you can stay fully yourself, where love does not cost you your identity. And here's the truth I want you to take with you. You are not difficult to love. You are not too emotional. You are not asking for too much. The patterns that have caused you the most pain in love are not the truest thing about you. They are the oldest thing about you. And old does not mean permanent. Old means it was written first, before you had any say in what was being written. But you have a say now. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop trying harder inside the wrong dynamic and start choosing environments where you don't have to shrink at all. So tell me in the comments, when have you noticed yourself becoming smaller in a relationship? Which pattern did you recognize in yourself today? If this resonated, share this with a woman in your life who needs to hear it. And if you're ready to stop understanding the pattern from a distance and actually start changing it, you can book a free call with me. Link is in the description. I'm Eve. This is Love Forward. I'll see you in the next episode.